You woke up at 6 a.m., took a cold shower, avoided your phone for the first hour, went for a morning walk gazing at the horizon, and yet you still feel empty. I know exactly how you feel, because I too followed every Huberman protocol to the letter, every dopamine hack, every neural optimization technique, and I only discovered the truth when it was almost too late. The mistake no one noticed isn't in the protocols, it's in the very idea that dopamine needs optimization. Jung knew the secret of dopamine 100 years ago, and what he discovered will destroy everything. You believe about motivation, but first tell me something. How many times have you felt like a lab rat following protocols? How many times did you wake up motivated by a new technique, only to find yourself 3 weeks later exactly where you started? I spent 2 years of my life in that cycle. 2 years chasing the next hack, the next protocol, the next optimization, until I found something that changed everything. A letter Jung wrote in 1957 to an American colleague. A letter that no productivity guru wants you to read, because it reveals something disturbing about human nature. In the letter, Jung describes a specific patient, a 38-year-old engineer who had turned his life into an optimization experiment. Sound familiar? This patient woke up at 5:30 a.m., made detailed lists, timed every activity, controlled the ambient temperature, modulated light exposure, constantly monitored his heart rate, and yet he continued to feel dead inside. Jung wrote a phrase that haunted me for weeks. Modern man does not suffer from a lack of pleasure. He suffers from an excess of the pursuit of pleasure. But there was more to the letter. Jung observed something that no modern neuroscientist mentions. The more the patient optimized external systems, the more disconnected he became from his inner wisdom. As if each protocol built a wall between him and his own soul. Stop for a second, reread that sentence, because it will blow your mind. While Huberman teaches you to modulate dopamine, Jung discovered that the problem is wanting to modulate it. While you learn to regulate neurotransmitters, Jung revealed that regulation is the very prison. But here's what no one tells you. Jung wasn't against science. He was one of the first psychiatrists to study the brain. The difference is that he understood something that modern neuroscience has forgotten. The brain is not a machine to be optimized, it's a mystery to be lived. And here began my obsession. Because if Jung was right, then every dopamine protocol you follow is taking you further from the real solution. I started investigating. I delved into Jung's archives. I studied the cases he documented, and I discovered something that will sound like heresy to any Huberman follower. Jung's patients who overcame addictions, depression, and lack of motivation never regulated dopamine. They did something completely different. They embraced what Jung called creative tension. The ability to live with internal contradictions without trying to resolve them immediately. Imagine a stretched bow. The strength of the bow doesn't come from relaxing the string. It comes from maintaining the tension. Jung discovered that genuine motivation works exactly like that. But this contradicts everything you've learned, doesn't it? Because you were taught that low dopamine is a problem, that boredom is the enemy, that discomfort must be eliminated. Jung knew this is a dangerous lie. Because when you optimize dopamine, you are training your brain to depend on external stimuli. You become a motivation addict, a neurological beggar. And here's the scariest part. I tested this in my own life. For 3 months, I abandoned all of Huberman's protocols. I stopped taking cold showers. I stopped avoiding my phone. I stopped timing everything. And instead, I applied Jung's method. The first 15 days were infernal. My mind screamed for structure, for optimization, for control. It was as if a part of me was dying. But Jung had prepared his patients for this. He called it the dark night of the soul, the moment you stop running from the emptiness and finally confront it. On the 16th day, something changed. A different kind of quiet appeared. It wasn't the forced motivation of the protocols. It was something deeper, more real. It was as if my brain had remembered how to function naturally. And then I understood what Jung meant. Dopamine doesn't need to be optimized. It needs to be respected, like a force of nature that has its own cycles. But wait, I'm not saying Huberman is completely wrong. I'm saying he's solving the wrong problem. Huberman tries to regulate dopamine. Jung taught how to dance with it. The difference is subtle but revolutionary. When you regulate, you control from the outside in. When you dance, you respond from the inside out. And here's where it gets interesting. Because Jung developed specific techniques for this dance, techniques that not even modern Jungian therapists fully understand. The first technique he called amplification. It's not meditation, it's not mindfulness, it's something much more radical. You take a moment of low dopamine, a moment of boredom or emptiness, and instead of running away, you amplify it. You dive deeper. You explore the texture of the void. Sound crazy? Jung tested this with hundreds of patients, and the results were consistent. After weeks of amplifying the void, something extraordinary emerged. An internal source of energy that didn't depend on external stimuli. A motivation that came from the self, not from regulated dopamine, but from the integrated soul. But here's the problem. This approach requires something our culture hates: patience, trust in the process, acceptance that real growth is slow, and that's why no one teaches Jung, because it doesn't fit the results in 30 days model. It doesn't generate clicks with 3 simple steps. It's a path that demands emotional maturity, but the results are permanent. Because when you stop optimizing dopamine and start understanding it, you discover something that Huberman never mentions. Dopamine isn't just about pleasure and motivation, it's about meaning, and meaning can't be hacked, it can only be lived. Jung discovered that people with genuine motivation had one thing in common. They had stopped seeking happiness and started seeking wholeness. The difference is simple. Happiness depends on circumstances. Wholeness comes from accepting all parts of yourself, including the shadow parts you try to optimize. And when you embrace wholeness, dopamine regulates itself naturally, without protocols, without hacks, without constant struggle. It's as if your brain remembers how to be human. But this brings us to the most controversial aspect of Jung's work, something that might sound unsettling to modern minds. Jung believed that depression, boredom, and lack of motivation are not problems to be solved. They are messages to be heard. Messages from a deeper part of yourself that's trying to communicate something vital, something your conscious mind, obsessed with optimization, refuses to listen to. What if your low dopamine wasn't a bug to be fixed, but a feature to be understood? This question changed my life because I stopped fighting my internal states and started collaborating with them. When I felt boredom, I asked, what is this trying to teach me? When I felt emptiness, I questioned, what part of me is being neglected? And the answers that came were deeper than any dopamine protocol. I discovered that my boredom stemmed from living a life that wasn't truly mine. My emptiness signaled that I was chasing external goals instead of internal purpose. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, instead of who you think you should be. And here's the beautiful paradox. When I stopped trying to be motivated, I found real motivation. When I stopped chasing dopamine, it started flowing naturally, not in a forced or artificial way, organically, like water finding its own course. And then I understood the true genius of Jung. He wasn't trying to optimize the human psyche. He was trying to liberate it. Because the psyche, when free from constant interference, self-regulates, like a natural ecosystem finding its own equilibrium. But our culture has taught you the opposite. It's taught you that you need to be the CEO of your own mind, the chief optimizer of your neurotransmitters. Jung knew this is a dangerous illusion, because the conscious mind is only the tip of the iceberg. The majority of your psyche operates below consciousness. And when you try to control everything consciously, you're fighting against 90% of yourself. It's like trying to drive a car holding only the steering wheel, ignoring the engine, the brakes, the transmission. Jung taught his patients to cooperate with the whole psyche, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, order and chaos. And when this cooperation happened, motivation emerged naturally, not as something forced from the outside, but as an authentic expression of who they truly were. But to get there, you need to go through something our culture avoids at all costs. You need to confront your own internal contradictions. Jung called this conjunctio, the union of opposites within you, the ability to be simultaneously strong and vulnerable, confident and uncertain, motivated and at peace with emptiness. And here's where Huberman and Jung completely diverge. Huberman tries to eliminate contradictions through protocols. Jung taught to dance with them because he discovered something revolutionary. Vital energy doesn't come from resolving contradictions. It comes from holding them in creative tension, like a musician who doesn't try to eliminate the tension between notes, but uses it to create melody. And when you learn this dance, something magical happens. You stop needing external motivation, because you find an internal source that never runs dry, a source that doesn't depend on optimized dopamine, but on a life fully lived. But here's where you might be thinking, this sounds too abstract, too philosophical. I need something practical. And I understand, because I thought the same thing, until I discovered that Jung was obsessed with practical application. So much so that he developed specific techniques you can start today. The first technique is called active imagination, and it's nothing like the visualization you know. It's not positive affirmation, it's not manifestation of desires, it's something far more radical and powerful. Active imagination is a direct dialogue with your unconscious, a method to access the wisdom that your conscious mind ignores. Jung used this to cure addictions, depression, and lack of purpose in cases that other therapists considered impossible. It works like this. You sit in silence, preferably at the same time for a few days, without trying to meditate, without trying to empty your mind. Instead, you invite images to emerge naturally, as if it were an internal cinema you never knew existed. And when an image appears, you don't analyze it, you don't try to interpret it, you talk to it, as if it were a real person sitting in front of you. You ask questions, you listen to answers, you establish a genuine dialogue. Sounds crazy? Jung documented thousands of cases where this technique revealed life-changing insights that no dopamine protocol could ever generate, because these insights came from an intelligence deeper than the rational mind. But here's what Jung discovered that will shock you. The images that emerge in active imagination know things you consciously don't know. They know solutions to problems your logical mind can't solve. Because here's the secret Huberman doesn't understand. Real motivation doesn't come from balanced neurotransmitters. It comes from alignment with your true self. And your true self isn't in your conscious mind. It's in the dialogue between conscious and unconscious. I remember a patient of Jung's named Herbert, a 45-year-old executive at a Swiss manufacturing company. Herbert had tried all the productivity methods of the time: stopwatches, detailed lists, military routines, concentration techniques. He even went so far as to divide his day into 15-minute blocks. Nothing worked. Every morning he woke up exhausted. Every night he went to bed feeling like he had wasted another day. His wife said he looked like a ghost trying to be productive. Jung asked Herbert to practice active imagination for 30 days. On the first day, nothing. On the second, only confused fragments. But on the third day, an image emerged, clear as a film. A magnificent wolf trapped in a gilded cage. The cage was beautiful, ornate, but it was still a prison. Herbert talked to the wolf. He asked why it was imprisoned. The wolf looked at him with sad eyes and replied something that changed everything. Because you only feed me with the approval of others, and the approval of others is poisoned food. That sentence blew Herbert's mind. He realized that all his lack of motivation came from living for external expectations. It wasn't laziness. It wasn't dopamine deficiency. It was inner wisdom, signaling a deep misalignment with his true nature. The wolf continued, "You want to free me? Stop giving me poisoned food. Feed me with what genuinely moves you." In 6 months, Herbert completely changed careers. He left manufacturing and became a furniture craftsman, something he'd always wanted to do but considered unproductive. And for the first time in decades, he felt genuine energy, not forced, not optimized, authentic as breathing. But Herbert did something that will shock you. He abandoned all his productivity habits. He stopped tracking everything. He stopped forcing routines. And yet, he became more productive than ever. Because real productivity doesn't come from external discipline. It comes from doing what you were born to do. And how do you discover what you were born to do? Jung developed a revolutionary second technique. He called it following the energy. It's radical in its simplicity. Instead of forcing motivation through discipline, you observe where it arises naturally. Instead of fighting resistance like a warrior, you explore what it's protecting like a detective. Jung noticed something fascinating. Authentic people had a unique energetic signature. Certain activities energized them instantly. Others drained them even if they were important. And the difference had nothing to do with difficulty or ease. I tested this in my own life in a radical way that almost cost me relationships. For a whole month, I only did things that gave me natural energy. I ignored to-do lists. I ignored should-dos. I ignored social obligations. I followed only the authentic energy that spontaneously arose. It was terrifying, because our culture programs you to deeply distrust your own impulses. It teaches you that discipline is everything, that willpower is the supreme virtue, that if you follow natural energy, you'll become lazy and irresponsible. Jung knew this is a destructive cultural lie. Constant willpower is a symptom of living the wrong life. When you're aligned with your true self, motivation arises naturally, like water springing from an underground spring. But in the first days of following energy, my mind went into complete panic. What if I never do anything productive again? What if I become a bum? What if I disappoint everyone who trusts me? Jung called this ego resistance. The part of you programmed for control tries to sabotage the process of individuation. But I persisted. And on day 12, something extraordinary happened. I woke up with a clarity I had never felt before. I knew exactly what to do, not because someone had told me, but because my entire being was aligned with that action. It was as if my psyche had stopped fighting against itself, and all the energy wasted in internal conflict now flowed towards my true goals. For the first time, I understood what Jung meant. When you stop optimizing dopamine and start following inner wisdom, life becomes effortless, not effortless as easy, effortless as without internal friction. Because friction doesn't come from external challenges. It comes from being at war with parts of yourself. And this is where Jung becomes really controversial. He discovered that the parts we reject the most are the ones that contain our greatest wasted energy. Jung called this the shadow, the aspects of ourselves that we consider unacceptable. Laziness, anger, selfishness, lust, envy, arrogance, all the qualities that our upbringing taught us to hide or eliminate. But Jung made a shocking discovery. These negative qualities aren't defects to be corrected. They are misdirected energies to be transformed. Huberman teaches you to suppress these parts through rigorous discipline. Jung taught to integrate them through conscious acceptance. The difference is revolutionary and goes against everything you've learned about personal growth. When you suppress, you expend monumental energy fighting against yourself. It's like driving with the emergency brake on. When you integrate, you transform shadow energy into fuel for your authentic goals. But how do you do this without becoming a terrible person? Jung developed a third technique that may sound heretical: dialogue with the shadow. It works like this. You identify a trait you deeply hate in yourself, laziness, for example. Instead of fighting it like an enemy, you talk to it as if it were a wounded part of you that needs to be heard. Ask with genuine curiosity, what are you trying to protect me from? Or what legitimate need are you representing that I'm ignoring? The answers will shock you, because laziness is often wisdom in disguise. Your unconscious saying, you're pursuing goals that aren't yours. I'm protecting you from wasting your life on things that don't matter. I remember a patient of Jung's who documented this process in detail. Emily, a 32-year-old German writer who tortured herself over constant laziness. She had published 2 commercially successful books, but each new project was an epic battle. She would spend hours sitting in front of the typewriter, unable to produce a line. She felt guilty, unproductive, as if something were fundamentally broken in her. She even resorted to stimulants to force creativity. Jung asked her to do something radical. Instead of fighting the laziness, talk to it. Discover what it was trying to communicate. Emily resisted for weeks. This is absurd. Laziness is laziness. I need discipline, not conversations with flaws. But Jung insisted, and in the first dialogue, something surprising emerged. The laziness had a clear and direct voice. I'm protecting you from writing garbage you hate. I'm saving your true energy to write what you really want. Emily was shocked. But I need to make money. I need to meet the expectations of the publishers. The laziness replied, and that's why I'm here, to prevent you from prostituting your talent. Your writer's soul refuses to write what doesn't move it. I am that refusal manifested. For the first time, Emily realized she was trying to write commercial books that she deeply hated. Her laziness was creative resistance, protection of the soul against artistic betrayal. When she started writing what genuinely moved her, laziness disappeared instantly. It was replaced by a natural creative flow that seemed to come from an inexhaustible source. Not because she optimized dopamine, but because she stopped fighting against her own creative nature. And here's Jung's deepest insight. Psychological symptoms are not problems to be solved. They are inner intelligence trying to guide you. Anxiety tells you that something is out of alignment. Depression signals that you are living someone else's life. Boredom indicates that you are underestimating your potential, but our culture teaches you to medicate symptoms, to optimize neurotransmitters, to suppress internal signals. Jung saw this as violence against the soul. Because when you silence symptoms, you silence wisdom, and when you silence wisdom, you lose access to the source of genuine motivation. But here's where Jung's approach becomes even more radical. He discovered that psychic energy works exactly like physical energy. It cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one form to another. This means that all the energy you spend fighting against yourself could be redirected towards your true goals. All the energy wasted on self-criticism could fuel creativity. All the energy lost in guilt could generate genuine action. Imagine discovering you had a V8 engine running inside you, but you were only using 2 cylinders. The other 6 were being wasted on internal conflicts, self-reproach, resistance to parts of yourself, psychological civil war. Jung estimated that people in constant internal conflict use only 20 to 30% of their total available energy. The rest is lost in internal friction, like a car with the brakes locked trying to accelerate. And the key to accessing your full energetic potential? To stop being an enemy of yourself. To start being an ally to all your parts. Even the parts you consider problematic or inconvenient, because each rejected part carries a portion of your vital energy. And when you consciously reintegrate them, that energy becomes available for your authentic projects. Jung called this the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposites in creative tension without trying to prematurely resolve them. And this may be the most revolutionary discovery in human psychology. Think about it. Our culture teaches you that contradictions are problems, that you need to choose to be strong or vulnerable, confident or humble, motivated or at peace with emptiness. Jung discovered that this is a destructive lie, because psychological maturity doesn't come from resolving contradictions. It comes from learning to dance with them. How to be simultaneously ambitious and patient, confident and humble, motivated and at peace with moments of emptiness. Assertive and receptive, a planner and spontaneous. This isn't mental confusion, it's emotional sophistication. And when you develop the transcendent function, something extraordinary happens. You stop wasting energy trying to be just one thing, and you begin to access the power of being multifaceted in harmony. It's like an orchestra. Each instrument has its unique voice, but the magic happens when they all play together in harmony, not by eliminating instruments. By coordinating differences, when the transcendent function is activated, dopamine regulates itself naturally, because there is no longer an internal war consuming energy. All aspects of you are collaborating instead of competing. But we arrive at the most disturbing aspect of Jung's work, something that could destroy your current worldview. Jung discovered that the modern obsession with optimization is a symptom of a deep cultural wound. Our society has lost connection with the sacred, with mystery, with the acceptance that not everything needs to be controlled. And when you lose connection with the sacred, you develop a compulsion for control, a desperate attempt to create meaning through optimization. But meaning doesn't come from control, it comes from surrender. Surrender not as passivity, but as cooperation with forces greater than your conscious mind. Jung called these forces the self, with a capital S, the totality of your psyche, conscious and unconscious, individual and collective. And when you learn to cooperate with the self, life becomes a dance. You stop forcing. You begin to flow, like a surfer who doesn't fight the wave, but rides it. But to get there, you need to go through something our culture considers heresy. You need to admit that you are not in control, that your conscious mind is just a small executive in a much larger corporation. And when you accept this, something liberating happens. You stop trying to be the CEO of yourself, and you become a collaborator in your own totality. It is at this moment that genuine motivation emerges, not as something you produce, but as something you allow, like breathing. You don't force air into your lungs. You remove obstacles, and breathing happens naturally. Jung discovered that motivation works the same way. You don't produce it. You remove internal obstacles, and it flows. But what are these obstacles that block natural motivation? Jung identified three main ones that appear in virtually every case of a lack of authentic energy. First, the need for external approval. When you live for the validation of others, you lose complete connection with internal motivation. It's like trying to drive looking only in the rearview mirror. You move, but you don't know where you're really going. Jung observed that people addicted to approval develop a specific type of exhaustion. They are always on, always performing, always adjusting their behavior based on external reactions, and this drains vital energy brutally. Second, the paralyzing fear of failure. When you avoid risks at all costs, you also avoid the possibilities of genuine growth. Jung discovered that the fear of failure is often disguised fear of discovering who you really are. Because if you never try, you never need to confront your real limitations. But there's something more subtle here. People afraid of failure become perfectionists, and perfectionism is a sophisticated form of procrastination. You postpone real action indefinitely under the pretext of not being ready yet. Third, total identification with the persona. When you confuse who you are with the mask you wear socially, Jung knew that the persona is necessary for social functioning. But it becomes toxic when you forget that it's just a mask. People identified with the persona live in constant fear of being discovered. They spend monumental energy maintaining an image that may not even be authentic. And this maintenance consumes resources that could fuel real projects. Removing these obstacles is not easy. It requires psychological courage to disappoint others, to fail publicly, to show imperfect and vulnerable parts of yourself, to admit that you don't know everything, to be human instead of perfect. But when you do that, something magical happens. Energy that was trapped in maintaining masks becomes available for authentic expression, and authentic expression generates natural motivation. Because you are doing what you came to do, not what you should do, not what others expect, what you were born to express. Jung spent his life studying people who found this internal source. And he discovered a consistent pattern that contradicts everything our culture teaches. Every single one of these individuals had gone through what he termed ego death. A specific moment where they stopped trying to control everything and surrendered to the mysterious process of becoming who they truly were. Not physical death, the death of the illusion that you're in absolute command of your life, the compulsive need to optimize every aspect of existence, the belief that happiness comes from external control. This process has identifiable stages. First comes resistance. Your conscious mind desperately fights to maintain control. It creates more protocols, more optimizations, more systems. Then comes the collapse, the moment you realize that none of this actually works, that you're exhausted from being the CEO of yourself, that something needs to die for something greater to be born. Then comes surrender. Not as giving up, but as a humble acknowledgement that there's a higher intelligence operating through you, and that your job isn't to control this intelligence, it's to cooperate with it. And when the ego dies, something greater is born, a version of you aligned with the totality of the psyche. Jung called this rebirth, and people who went through this process never needed external motivation again, because they had found the source. And the source is inexhaustible. Now stop, take a deep breath, because what I'm about to ask you might change your life. What if your entire quest for dopamine optimization was a way to avoid this encounter with your true self? What if all the protocols, hacks, and techniques were sophisticated distractions from the real work of individuation? Jung knew this is the hardest truth to accept. That real growth doesn't come from adding things to your life. It comes from removing what isn't truly yours. Like a sculptor who doesn't add material to the marble, but removes everything that isn't the statue. And when you remove everything that isn't truly you, what remains is an inexhaustible source of authentic energy, not regulated dopamine, not forced motivation, but the natural expression of who you are when you stop pretending to be someone else. Jung called this complete individuation. And people who got there radiated a particular quality. They didn't seem to be striving to live. They seemed to be being lived by something greater, like a tree that doesn't strive to grow. It simply expresses its intrinsic nature. And maybe, just maybe, this is the true optimization our era has lost, not optimizing dopamine as if it were a scarce resource to be managed, but optimizing authenticity as if it were the only currency that truly matters, not regulating neurotransmitters like a technician adjusting a machine, but regulating alignment with your true self like an artist finding their unique voice, because when you live in complete authenticity, something magical happens. Energy flows naturally like a river finding the sea. Motivation arises spontaneously like the rising sun. Purpose reveals itself organically like a blossoming flower. And you finally understand what Jung discovered 100 years ago. What he saw in his most transformed patients, what he experienced on his own journey of individuation. The secret was never in controlling dopamine, never in optimizing neurochemistry, never in forcing motivation through external protocols. The secret was in liberating the soul, in allowing your deepest essence to finally breathe, in stopping being an enemy of yourself and starting to be a collaborator of your own wholeness. And a liberated soul doesn't need any protocol, doesn't need any hack, doesn't need any optimization. It simply shines as it always has shone, as it has always been waiting to shine. The only protocol you really need is to remember who you are when no one is looking.